Okay, it is 4:30. I'm calling this meeting to order. Wingen, welcome. I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, DELEGATIONS Tla-o-qui-aht. Notice to attendees, the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And a notice to virtual attendees. In order to sign up for public input sections of the agenda, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. Please include your name, address, and the agenda item you wish to speak to. If you do all those things, we will call on you at the appropriate time. I recommend that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229/2016 as amended, the March 14, 2023 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC, through unanimous consent if there is no objections. Seeing none, motion is carried. Also through unanimous consent, I move that the March 14th, 2023 regular council agenda be adopted. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. Also through unanimous consent, I recommend that the minutes of the regular council meeting held February 21st, 2023 be adopted. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. It's actually, I think it's the first time we haven't had somebody on the screen. You know, I don't have to look up there for somebody with their little yellow hand up. That's nice.
Put yellow gloves on if you like.
You could do that. Little yellow hand. Ms. Larson, do we have public comment on agenda items besides Ms. Lowther?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We currently only have Mrs. Lowther in attendance virtually, other than our delegate and staff. So I won't do a call out as Ms. Lowther is already signed up.
Super. Okay, well then, if Ms. Lowther is listening, Ms. Lowther, you have 2 minutes. Please do, though, restate your name, your address, and the agenda item you would like to comment on.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Christine Lowther, 201-240 Arnet Road. Correspondence item 9.1, Wingen Lane. Okay, so lights can attract and disorient seabirds during their flights between colony and foraging sites at sea, and darkness is habitat. And also recently, Anholt, a town in Denmark, swapped its entire collection of public street lights for dark sky friendly lamps, and also having darker skies and being able to see the stars adds to quality of life for humans. So considering all that, I was wondering if the Wingen Lane question for having lights, if we could maybe come up with motion detectors, and in any case use it as an opportunity to I'm going blank. Use it as an opportunity to stand by like Tofino's already existing mandate for dark night skies. I think that makes sense. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lowther. Okay, just move here. Do we have anybody else signed up for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the mayor's report. Last regular council meeting, I announced that there would be a financial planning open house that was has been delayed. That is now on March 29th and be 4 to 6 here in council chambers. And people will have the ability at that meeting, that open house, to comment on the off-leash dog issue once again. So even though that's has been closed on Talk Tofino, that will be a last chance to talk about that at the financial planning open house, March 29th, 4 to 6. Another little note, coming up this Thursday, March 16th, there's another mayor's breakfast, 9 o'clock at the Commonwealth Bake Shop, and that is put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And I think it's a good time to just acknowledge what a fantastic business community we have here in Tofino. And I'm very much thankful for all the wonderful businesses and business owners. Strategic planning, council has had the first two days of strategic planning, and it's a great opportunity for all councillors to review, how far we've come and where we're going. So I look forward to being part of a great team going forward. And of course, financial planning is also underway, noting that meeting. So just to let notice to the community that very important part of our year. It was wonderful to have our MLA, Miss Josie Osborne, here, not only to meet with council, but also to for a little media opportunity at the Tofino Housing Corporation Headwaters project. And Ms. Osborne's put a lot of time and effort, both as our mayor, previous mayor, and as our MLA in seeing affordable housing prioritized in our region. I very much thank her for that. It was also wonderful to see her constituency assistants. And a big shout out to Rhino Coffee and Tough City Radio for hosting both Ms. Osborne and I on the morning show, and it was a great time to discuss all things Tofino and region, and a great time to talk about politics in general and some of the challenges and opportunities right now. Executive Director at Tofino Housing Corporation, Executive Director Ian Scott, and I were able to present on Tofino's affordable housing initiatives. We were able to present at the Revelstoke Housing Summit. Of course, we were there virtually, and not only was it a good opportunity to share what Tofino has been doing through the THC, but also to learn what other communities as far away as Canmore and Alberta have been doing. So I hope to bring some of those interesting tidbits back for council and staff. Wonderful opportunity, just again, to see what's going on in the province and even in Alberta towards affordable housing. I believe that's it for my mayor's report. We're moving on to delegations. I believe we have one, Broombusters. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Watt. So we do have a representative from Broombusters who's joining us virtually. I'll just add her as a panelist here, and then Joanne, you should be able to use your computer to share your screen and access your video and your microphone.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Law and council members, for letting me speak today. I wish I could be there in person. I am the executive director of Broombusters Invasive Plant Society. We have chapters in 17 municipalities, local governments across Vancouver Island and the mainland now. Wanted this opportunity to talk to Tofino, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak, and I'm going to try to get my slideshow working. So, okay, so there was a resolution to AVICC this year calling for action to stop the spread of Scotch broom. Can you see me?
We can see you, but we don't have a panel.
Okay, hold on. Let me back up again for a moment. Something went wrong because I can't see me. Okay, hold on.
And just while
I know what I did.
I'm just going to ask Ms. Larson if that screen is supposed to be on behind you.
Oh.
That's okay. You go ahead.
I know what I did.
Issues, and we'll work on ours.
Here we go. Now it's going to work. How many times do I need to actually practice this before I do it? Okay, here we are. Okay. Yeah, so Qualicum Beach is presenting a resolution to AVICC about calling for action to stop the spread of Scotch broom. I will send you each a copy of this resolution. I'll do that tomorrow. What's the problem with Scotch broom? Well, it's been getting off scot-free for 170 years on Vancouver Island. Came into Souk and has been moving north, and now it's moving on to the mainland. These are all photos from New Zealand. Whenever local people go to New Zealand, they send me photos because they're just appalled at how broom and gorse have taken over the mountainsides. This is what we don't want on Vancouver Island, and that's what we're trying to prevent. One of the reasons why is because it's so flammable. You can't see probably the picture in the corner, but that's actually a very huge fire. It's as tall as those trees. That was a controlled burn in Powell River. Terry Peters is the fire chief in Powell River, and he started a Broombusters chapter there because he was tired of having the fires along the transmission lines going through the city. Climate change will bring us drought and hotter temperatures in which Scotch broom will thrive. Unfortunately, that's true, and act as a volatile flash fuel, increasing the risk of wildfires and specifically urban interface fires. And part of the reason for this is that broom in the summer has naturally occurring dry branches and high oil content. These photos that you see here, this is not cut broom. This was just what broom looks like during a dry summer. So you can imagine how flammable that is. When you look at the power lines from above, you can see lines and lines of yellow flowers. These are not small flowers. These are big bushes. And you can see me walking next to, these are 8 to 10, 12 foot tall Scotch broom. So broom covering the transmission lines greatly increases the danger that fire could spread across the island. It carries seeds to previously broom-free areas, and it blocks escape routes. BC Hydro does not control the spread of broom because there is no pressure from governing entities. And that's what we're trying to generate is participation of governing entities. Scotch broom spreads densely and rapidly and grows huge quickly. Okay, so you can see how tall this broom is. The reason why broom is not a tree, it's a woody weed. And so it outcompetes the trees, and it takes the nutrients, takes the water and so on. And the trees are stifled in growth or smothered completely. So Scotch broom inhibits forest regrowth. And looking at these photos from Parksville, you can see how the broom has moved into among the small forest trees. So we have lost forests, and we also have lost timber sales, both from transmission lines and logging roads into the forests. So Oregon, for example, in 2014 had $47 million lost in timber sales. And in Washington, 2017, a forecast of $142.7 million lost in timber sales. Broom negatively impacts agricultural production because Scotch broom is toxic to grazing animals and wildlife. They cannot eat it, but it displaces the grasses and the food that they do need to eat. Scotch broom releases toxins and changes soil chemistry, so it's less suitable for our native species. You can just look at these photos and see that it has deserved the name of the scourge of pasture land. These are our two local farms on eastern Vancouver Island. When broom takes over farms, it's hard to reclaim. And the reason why is that a single plant can produce 18,000 seeds that are viable in the soil for 30 plus years. So you can imagine trying to turn this soil, and then the seeds, which only sprout in the sun, the seeds will then sprout. We have private property problems all over the island. Land is too often stripped of trees, cleared for development that often never happens, or for farming, but then the land is left neglected and broom takes over. The picture on the left, the forest was cut down, and the photo that you see there was how much broom had grown in 2 growing seasons. The top was cleared 10 years ago or more, and no trees have regrown. The bottom one is a new clearing near Top Ridge, and you can see some broom in the middle. So if nothing is done about that, that will be another broom field. Broom fields are a tragedy we could prevent. So a study was done in 2021 for the Invasive Species Council of BC, and they found that Scotch broom is a very serious threat to biodiversity. In fact, the worst. Scotch broom is the invasive species causing the greatest harm to species at risk in BC. So in this chart here, the very top bar, all you have to see is that Scotch broom compared to all the other invasive animals and plants. So therefore, let it be resolved that we establish and implement actionable steps to control the aggressive spread of Scotch broom across BC. And therefore, implement broom-free fire breaks along long stretches of Broom. That is a very specific request because we want to make sure that if there is a fire, it doesn't go somewhere else. So be it resolved that local governments are encouraged to use bylaws and policies to control and manage Scotch broom within and near urban boundaries. You can see how huge that broom plant is. So considering how harmful and dangerous it is, our question is, why is nothing being done about Scotch broom? Why is it only classified as a weed of concern? One reason is because it spreads so widely that we think we can't get rid of it, but that's not an excuse not to do anything. And also, Scotch broom is mostly on Vancouver Island. If you look at the map there, you can see it started at the south of the island, has moved across the island, now it's moving onto the mainland. So if Scotch broom is mostly on Vancouver Island, it's up to local governments and communities on Vancouver Island to speak out and take action. So Broombusters' request is that Tofino support Qualicum Beach's resolution at AVICC to address the rampant and unchecked spread of Scotch broom on Vancouver Island. People really care about this, and that's why we have so many volunteers. They want to see action, and they're willing to take part in doing it. So we have our first group on the mainland at Coquitlam, and we have the little fish hatchery, and actually our MLA, Adam Walker, is there in that picture, and groups cutting on the major highways. So 2006, there were about 10 of us volunteers. 2022, 667 volunteers cut broom over 6,000 hours across Vancouver Island and the mainland. And there's now Broombusters from Soup to Alert Bay, from West Coast to Coquitlam, and 17 local governments participate. So just a tip on why it's working and why it didn't used to work. The word was you couldn't get rid of Scotch broom. And it's because people were doing it wrong. They were pulling it out. And then as soon as the seeds would see the sun, they would all sprout again. So the technique that works is you cut broom in bloom at ground level or below. Don't pull mature broom, don't mow, don't excavate. It's the 3 stalks you see. You'd have to go below that to the single stalk of broom, and then that plant will actually die. The soil won't be disturbed, and so the other seeds won't sprout. So as far as Tofino goes, Tofino could become broom free. This is a picture here of Savory Island. This is what we don't want to happen on our west coastline. So Broombusters could help Tofino, and here's what was required and what we do. Just need a community organizer, somebody to communicate with. Then volunteers cut the broom. The town disposes of the cut broom. That's the partnership. Broombuster helps with training, signs, publicity tools, and a website. So communities organize their group cuts. They're totally, on their own, have total autonomy. Then Broombusters and volunteers also can go cut on their own time for over 4 to 6 weeks while the broom is in bloom. And that's what makes the difference of getting so much broom removed, is that people have the freedom to go out when they have time, not just at one scheduled cut. We stop cutting when the seed pods form. And broom busting is fun, and it's even addicting. As far as the ACRD lands, volunteers are encouraged to go there to cut broom as well. Broom knows no boundaries. So, people in Parksville are going to be helping in Arrington, everybody's just moving all around. So if you feel free to do that. Consider passing a bylaw before Scotch broom is too widespread. The following municipalities actually have passed them. Most of those have been passed since Broombusters started: Qualicum Beach, Parksville, Campbell River, Lanceville, Nanaimo, Port Alberni. So we found that a bylaw, it gives you some ground to stand on when you're talking to local residents or private property owners. So this is one thing that we can do for the earth. There's so many things we cannot do. This is something we can do, and we can't leave this problem to future generations. So let's stop the spread of Scotch broom. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a great mission and great project. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Move on to correspondence.
Just a quick comment.
Sure, quick comment. Yeah, absolutely. Is she still there?
Is she
She's
gone?
probably listening.
Are you there, Joanne? No, she's gone. I just want to point out, Joanne and I have been in correspondence, and she has presented several times at the ACRD. And one of the conversations that we had was to come and present and to look to a community volunteer. And so we've been trying to locate that. So if anybody here, and I'm looking across the table at a former landscaper, if she can think of anyone that might be interested. And then at some point, if that organization had come forward, that maybe there might be a discussion potentially with district staff to provide some support there. And we've certainly talked to the ACRD and the landfill about that support as well. So I didn't get the opportunity to thank her because she's a stalwart, and I will look to council if there was support, not just across the room over there, but in general, if we can look towards doing that. So I just wanted to thank her once again. That's great.
I think it's great. I'm full of support.
Yeah.
I actually keep a little saw when I go hiking. I saw broom.
Yeah.
That's what I do. But,
Yeah, I'd definitely be in support of that. I know it took me about a week and a half just to clear a 1/4 acre property of broom. Never want to do that again.
all right, let's go correspondence. We have 9.1 correspondence from Ardent Properties regarding the request for lighting on Wingen Lane. And this, of course, is right beside the Shore Building. We did have a comment from Ms. Lowther. Thank you, Ms. Lowther, for that comment. And I think that probably the most appropriate option here is to refer this to staff to follow up on. Council, refer this one to staff, this correspondence. And with a note to please record Ms. Lowther's comments in that referral. 9.2, we have correspondence from Christine Lowther regarding request for protected trees through significant tree bylaw. Any comments before I make a comment on that? This correspondence? No, I think this is another important letter from Ms. Lowther to that I would like to see included as we go forward and review the bylaw and create a new and robust tree bylaw. Presentations and reports. Let's get right on here. 10.1. We have first reading for 625 Nielsen Place. Mr. Thick.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I do have a short presentation. Starting over sharing. No rush. So this presentation has to do with the report that was part of Council's agenda package for the property at 625 Nielsen Place. This is an ongoing zoning application. We're considering the first reading of a potential bylaw today. This application was received on November 17th, 2021, and permission to proceed was granted May 24th last year. So it's been a little bit of time since this application has come before council, and there's a few councillors who have never seen it before. Really what we're kind of considering through this rezoning application is the applicant would like to subdivide the property, and the current zoning does not permit that. So we would be rezoning, looking to the future subdivision as a result of this rezoning. It's important to note that the application has changed since it was presented at permission to proceed. The major difference is that there's a 3-story mixed-use building that was proposed for the northern lot has been removed from the application after some further conferences with staff, as well as taking into account some of the comments that were made by council during the consideration for permission to proceed. So at this point, we are not looking to add any structures on the property. We're just looking for permission to further subdivide. So the location of the property is essentially at the corner of Campbell Street and Nielsen Place. It's important to note that this picture is a little bit dated. A lot of those trees have been cleared by the current property owner to facilitate the development of a house and a acres cottage on the properties that are currently there. So a quick view of the proposed subdivision. So the subdivision would cut the existing property from 1 parcel into 4 parcels. We would essentially separate the existing cottage as well as the house onto 2 different parcels. And then at the southern portion of the lot, there would be 2 smaller parcels placed there. It's important to note that this is kind of a subdivision plan that would illustrate the proposed subdivision for the purposes of rezoning. There'd be some additional considerations coming in. The first one that comes to mind is anytime we are creating a parcel that creates more than 2 additional lots. So right now we have 1 parcel, we're going to 4, so that's the creation of 3 new lots. We would also have to be obliged by provincial legislation to consider a parkland dedication, as well as some other things. Those are typically technical matters that are dealt with at subdivision. I only point that out now to say that this is kind of a preliminary subdivision plan used to inform the zoning. However, there will certainly be other considerations at the subdivision stage. Taking a quick look at some policy that we use to review these applications, largely in line with the vision to action. There's no environmentally sensitive areas noted on the property. It's largely been cleared at this point. So this further development would result in minimal environmental impacts. There's not really a significant increase in density. So staff don't have many comments or many concerns, I should say, about the increase in density in terms of managing development with respect to ecological and fiscal social limits. The official community plan is generally supportive. I would note that this is not a development that's designed to provide affordable housing, so it's not one of our highest priorities. However, we would be looking to create some smaller lots, and we would be removing short-term rental permissions, which may allow current community members additional housing opportunities. Again, similar sort of comments with the housing needs assessment. There is some alignment with the smaller proposed sites, smaller proposed lots. However, it's not one of the most highly prioritized forms of housing within that document, at least. We're still looking at fairly low density single family housing, which is, whether it has short-term rental permissions or not, fairly expensive in the current market and may not be within reach of many of our community members. However, there's also long-term rental opportunities created through these types of developments. Looking at the multimodal transportation plan, it's close to town and also close to the bus stop. It's not a huge increase in density. The one thing that staff would like to point out, though, is there's always that challenge of accessing them up across Campbell Street. So there's not really a lot of great pedestrian infrastructure. There's no sidewalk along Nielsen or no sidewalk along Campbell in front of the property. It's not too far out of the realm of kind of imagining that eventually there will be a sidewalk from Nielsen Place all the way into town, connecting up with the Gateway development past what was Shelter Restaurant through RPM all the way downtown. So at some point, whether it's in 10 or 20 years, maybe sometime down the line, it isn't too far to imagine that there will be a sidewalk on that side of the road. However, at this point in time, there is that pretty significant barrier of Campbell Street before you're getting over to the multi-use path. However, I would note that there is some walkable access there, and there's also a bus stop on that side of the road. The land use and demand study doesn't directly address residential developments. However, this, particularly the smaller lots, may provide an opportunity for attainable home ownership for some members of the community. Looking at our zoning, this is just kind of a table that compares the current zoning with the proposed zone. The major differences would be an increase in density of 6 units. That's including secondary suites in the proposed buildings, as well as an increase in the coverage of about 10%. That's largely to just allow a reasonable size structure to be built on the smaller lots. The front setbacks would be reduced for all the lots. There's no change in the rear setbacks, and the side setbacks would be reduced for the 2 smaller southern lots, again, just to facilitate an adequate building area for a reasonably sized dwelling. Some of the planning considerations, form and character doesn't play a huge consideration at this point in the proposal, largely because that 3-story building down near the northern end adjacent to Campbell Street has been removed from the proposal. So there aren't really very many buildings to comment on besides the 2 that are already created. What is more kind of relevant is the potential layout of the subdivision. Again, staff are at this point okay with what's being proposed. It's not a significant departure from the character of the area around. We're looking at reasonable sized lots with single family homes. So we're not looking at any real changes to the form of housing being provided, just slightly smaller lots, at least in a couple of cases. Taking a quick look at some of the housing considerations, it's not really designed to provide affordable housing, but again, the removal of short-term rental permissions, some smaller lots, does line up with the general overall kind of ideals of many of our guiding documents. There's some concerns around traffic and access, parking not so much, but access onto Nielsen is already a little bit troublesome with a bit of a strange traffic island there that makes left-hand turns quite challenging when you're coming into town. So it's likely that we will, even though this isn't a huge increase in density, we may take this opportunity to have some sort of traffic analysis done. This will probably be more refined after some consultation with the engineering department should we decide to move forward, but some sort of a traffic impact assessment or at least a letter of opinion in this case to help us understand what the impacts may be and if there's some a better way to manage traffic in that particular area. Servicing, again, probably the standard sorts of considerations. We'd be looking for a servicing brief and some water modeling to help us understand the impacts to district infrastructure. The scope of this would be negotiated with the applicant as well as with their engineering department. From an environmental standpoint, there's no noted environmentally sensitive areas. The lot is largely cleared, so this proposal will not further negatively impact the environmental or already existing environmental impacts on the lot. And there are no concerns around flooding and tsunami. It's well out of the established flooding in a tsunami inundation area and flooding areas as evidenced by our most recent data. A few other considerations to mention. Really the purpose of the zoning amendment is to set up a subdivision of the property. A lot of the technical considerations regarding access and servicing and potentially even frontage improvements, those sorts of things are best addressed through the subdivision process. Through this rezoning process, staff suggests that neighborhood character is probably one of the more important considerations in terms of how the subdivision is proposed to be laid out. We will be going through the standard referral process following first reading if that's successful. So that would be referral to MOTI as well as emergency services. That's our fire and ambulance response services, various internal departments and other agencies as necessary. From a community amenity contribution guideline, staff have estimated that the community CAC, according to the guidelines, would be at about $6,000. The reason for this is because the actual property is within the village containment area, which reduces the CAC expectation by 50%. So the increase in density is about 6 units. However, we would decrease that by 50%. So really, we're only considering a 3-unit increase in density. Typically, we only start looking at considering provisions for affordable housing once we reach the increase of 5 units at a minimum. And so that's why the CAC is where it's at. And I would also just like to note that during permission to proceed, staff made the recommendation that we don't hold a public hearing for this particular application. In lieu of that, hold a public information session following first reading. Staff will continue along with that trajectory. Council does have the option to opt into a public hearing should they wish to at this point, or maintain that kind of direction of not holding a public hearing. So the recommendations, we can either grant first reading, the options before council, I should say today, would be to grant first reading to the bylaw, either deny the application or defer, otherwise deal with the application. The options are up there on the screen. Staff are recommending option 1 at this point. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to speak to them.
Super, thank you, Mr. Thick. So we'll do a quick round of questions only for Mr. Thick for clarity. And then following that, if council chooses to make any comments, then we'll have a little round of comments for Mr. Thick's benefit and the applicant's benefit. So let's go around noting the time. Let's go ahead, Councilor Sawyer.
I just had a quick question through the chair about the design. Out of curiosity, given that the 2 new smaller lots at the end are laid side by side like that, are they anticipating doing an easement road across them, or will there be a driveway put through at the very end there for access?
Thank you for the question, Councilor Sawyer. Through the chair, my understanding is that the access to both those lots will be proposed via an easement. So it would be essentially an easement over the lot that's closest to Nielsen to access the lot behind, so that we wouldn't create a panhandle lot.
Okay.
So this point, and while that's not always the preferred mode of access, in this case, it may be feasible and supported by our approving officer.
Okay. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Any other questions from council? Oh, yes. Okay.
I think I saw the answer in there, but I just wanted to be extra clear. So that front lot that's on Campbell Street, that won't be allowed to ever have short-term rentals after it's rezoned if this proceeds?
That's correct. Yeah, thanks for the question. Through the chair, just as a point of clarification, and I know I think we talked about this a little bit before, but the idea of legal nonconformance would potentially come into play here. So in this case, my understanding is the applicant currently operates a short-term rental where they rent the caretaker's cottage and live in the main house. Once those units are on separate properties, that business would no longer be allowed to operate, as there would be no basically no alternative unit of dwelling for a long-term resident to live on those properties. So that short-term rental would cease to happen on those properties. However, it may be possible for the applicant to start operating a bed, to stop running the short-term rental as it is currently run, and instead operate a bed and breakfast in the main house. And then that permission would be carried on that property only. However, on the larger parcel that fronts on Campbell Street, as per your question, that would no longer be permitted. And I don't see any opportunity for them to enjoy the kind of permissions granted through a legal non-conforming process.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I just have one question, just before we go on. Did you have another question?
It was
Councillor Sawyer,
a
or-
follow-up to Councillor Sloman's question.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and then I have a
Just following up on that answer we just got, a note in the report that specifically said it would be ceasing the STR and bed and breakfast permissions on that property. So is it possible that it may still continue, or?
Yeah, thanks for the question through the chair. So there would be no short-term rental permissions of any kind, any vacation. So that's bed and breakfast or short-term rental. What I mentioned to Councillor Sloman was that should the applicant choose to begin operating a bed and breakfast operation within the main house, which they could if they were renting out just a couple of the rooms and they had a long-term tenant in one of the other rooms, they would then be eligible to be within the legal non-conforming framework moving forward. Should this rezoning bylaw, or should this rezoning, pardon me, be completed and adopted by council. I guess the only other comment that I can make about that is that if that's something that council absolutely does not want to allow to happen, we can look to a covenant or some other legal agreement that ensures that those uses will cease if that's one of the things that council would to ensure happens.
Thank you.
Right, now I just had a quick question about the sidewalk possibility. Is it, no, I seem to remember Miss Vermont back in the day seeing, SketchUp of a sidewalk on that side of the street for future consideration. I think you mentioned it, Mr. Thick. Is this an opportunity for us during this rezoning to perhaps require a sidewalk or do we need anything now or in the future from this rezoning that would benefit a sidewalk in the future?
Sure, thanks for the question. I'll make a couple comments and then I'm not sure if Mr. Lamont or Mr. Rogers would like to add anything. Typically with rezonings, we don't require too many commitments for frontage improvements during the rezoning stage. Where we actually have authority to require that under bylaw is through either a subdivision or a building permit. So that's typically where we ask for those frontage improvements, as it's a bit more of a straightforward discussion, to be somewhat candid, is that we actually have it under bylaw that we can require frontage improvements for the length of a particular property's frontage up to the center of the road line. I would say that we try to be fairly reasonable about that and try to understand the impact of the development on the frontage and whether the particular development warrants the frontage improvements that we might expect or desire. Frontage improvements are not always cheap, and so the requirement for them can kill a development quite quickly. And sometimes if we don't have any plans or any other neighboring kinds of frontage improvements for them to tie into it, it seems a little bit onerous for the applicant at that point. So in this case, I would recommend that we wait until the subdivision stage and then consider it. However, maybe I'll look to Mr. Rogers and Mr. Vermont in case they have any comments in addition to that.
I have no comments. I agree with what you said.
Through the chair, I could just comment on the design or the alignment of an eventual sidewalk there with the recent improvements to the multi-use path on the, correct in saying, the east side of the road. We considered the entire design, eventual design with the sidewalk on the opposite side of the road where this property frontage was considered, just so we weren't precluding any kind of future development there. There are a number of encroachments along that stretch there with
existing fences and things like that on adjacent properties that would, if a sidewalk were to be required, it would be just an isolated chunk at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I'm quite happy with this. I'm quite happy with the recommendation to support this for first reading. Council? Seeing no objections or further comments or questions, would somebody like to read this motion?
I'll move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1327 2023 be introduced and read a first time.
Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? None, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. All right, let's get to 10.2, development variance permit number 1022. Ms. Kreba. Oh, you're Ms. Kreba.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Ms. Kreba is actually feeling fairly ill right now, and so I'm going to be walking council through this presentation. So I asked for maybe some patience in advance, as I wasn't sure about that until about 2 hours ago, so I haven't really looked at this presentation too carefully. But I have a pretty good understanding of the application.
And I'm sure we've all read it, so.
So yeah, we'll move through it quite quickly here. So this would be the presentation related to the development variance permit application as part of council's agenda package for the property at 1249 Howard Drive. This is a quick reminder, Section 498 of the Local Government Act is what grants the local government here in the District of Tofino to issue a development variance permit. One of the things that's worth kind of remembering anytime we take a look at these is that we cannot grant a variance permit for things like use or a density. So I can't grant a variance permit to turn a residential property into a commercial property, or to increase, the 2 dwelling limit to all of a sudden you can have 15 dwelling units on property. That's what a rezoning is for, or a temporary use permit in certain situations. And then we also include variances for matters related to rental tenure or floodplain specifications. So you can't get a variance to say, okay, well, your floodplain says that I need to build at a certain height, but I'd like to vary that to get lower, because that's kind of more of a safety issue. So other than that, development variances are a very useful tool that council can use to address kind of sometimes the bluntness of the zoning bylaw, where it doesn't always apply in certain situations. It doesn't work very well, which is what this slide talks about. So as the world is not perfectly flat and square, sometimes development variance permits are useful in response to particular properties where the zoning does not allow development in a reasonable manner. So the property that we're considering today is 1249 Howard Drive, zoned R4. This is kind of a funny, very permissive zone, but it was designed to be used in conjunction with a larger comprehensive development over that full area, the sort of internal area of Chesterton Beach community neighborhood. That was never quite completed. Only the Howard Drive section was completed. It does have a development permit area impacting the property. That's the wildlife habitat development permit area, kind of a general environmental development permit area, and it's within the peninsula land use designation within the OCP. This particular slide shows some of the development constraints on the subject property to the, I believe, I guess it's the western end of the property. There's actually a significant covenant that covers about the western third of the property. And that's for largely for environmental purposes, vegetation removal, and to protect some drainage in that area. However, this property as well has a fairly significant dune, even kind of within that covenant line, or within, pardon me, outside of that covenant line, within the developable area of the property. And that's pushed the development a little bit closer to the road. So to remove that dune is certainly possible. It would be slightly financially onerous to the applicants, but it would also be would require some significant earthworks and removal of trees. And so this development variance permit has kind of come up as a result of some deliberate siting by the applicants in order to try to minimize the earthworks needed to develop the lot in the way that they're hoping to. The proposal, really what we're considering here, is whether or not we should be varying the zoning bylaw to allow parking within the front yard setback for this particular property. Part 6.7 of the zoning bylaw notes that no required parking spaces shall be permitted in any front or required side yard setback. What this proposal is looking to do is locate 3 parking spots within the front yard setback. So there are some existing frontage improvements that create a bit of a buffer. There's a space between Howard Drive and the property line that has several trees, mostly alders growing up there, as well as a sidewalk, curb and gutter along the side of Howard Drive. So there is a little bit of a buffer that exists already. Naturally, it is worth noting that this is public property. This is not private property. And the applicants within their site plan have noted that there will be some vegetation buffers along the property frontage there. This will be secured through the development permit process. So it's not really a specific part of this development variance permit process, but according to their site plan, we will be issuing, or will likely be issuing, a development permit that includes provisions for a landscape buffer along the frontage there as well. So it's not that they'll be parking, particularly that single parking spot will be directly along the front line, directly visible from Howard Drive. So kind of some of the highlights of Ms. Kriba's evaluation is that really what happens here is that we're increasing off-street parking that's available to the residents of the property there. The zoning here actually only requires that they provide one off-street parking space, but they're actually looking to provide three. So there would be less pressure from potential residents of this dwelling for use of the on-street parking spaces. Generally, the proposal does align with the OCP framework, guiding principles, think about maintaining vegetation and the overall rural character of this particular area. It is worth noting, though, as always, that this development variance permit is not a guarantee that no other trees will come down on the lot. That we do have the development permit area that does give us some sort of control over that, but it's still to a large extent at the owners and their professional biologist recommendations as to whether or not they maybe do some further clearing in the future. My understanding of this application is that the applicant is not looking to vacation rental. To be honest, they actually don't have the parking that would be needed in order to vacation rental. I believe you need one parking space for each room that's for rent, as well as one parking space for the long-term tenant. What we'd be considering here is I think 1-bedroom suite, as well as a 3-bedroom main house. So they would be, if they were looking to vacation rent the main house, they would be required to have 4 off-street parking spaces, which they don't have the room to do at this point in time. So my understanding is that the applicant has indicated they have no desire to operate a short-term rental business here, and they further don't have the parking to do so. If they were to try to do that in the future, they would likely need to come back to council and seek an additional variance for additional parking within the front yard setback. Again, as noted, landscape screening would be provided in conformance with the design plans submitted, and there will be security associated with these works that would be managed through the development permit process. So that would come after this development variance permit, should this be approved at today's meeting. Public notice was mailed and hand delivered to properties within 60-meter radius 10 days ago, and there was no response received by staff as of the presentation this afternoon. The recommendation by staff is that DVP 10-22 is approved as presented. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to speak to them. I believe Ms. Kriba is also listening in, so if there are any specific questions, we might be able to call her in as well, as she spent a little bit more time with this application than I have.
Super. Thank you very much, Mr. Thick. Now I'm going to open up for questions from council. And just because we don't have a huge agenda, and it's probably a good time for new councillors to understand variance permits, now is a good time if you have a general question that can be a simple answer. That would be fine as well. So I'm opening it up to council for questions from Mr. Thick. Yes, Councillor Sloman.
I'm looking at the photo of the parking for the 3rd parking spot. And my question is about accessing that parking spot, because like if 2 vehicles are in that parking lot, how would they get that other one out?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, no, I think I know the one you're referring to.
Yeah.
And again, through the chair, that would be kind of at the discretion of the residents. Yeah, it would complicate matters here if you had 3 vehicles parked there. For the purposes of attaining a building permit, all they need to prove is 1 off-street parking space, and that's to be somewhat candid, where our interest somewhat ends. How they arrange the cars within their permitted parking areas is largely at the discretion of the owners or whoever's staying there at the time.
Any further questions for Mr. Thick? I see none. I assume We have support for this, so if that's the case, would somebody like to read the recommendation? Thanks.
I move that development variance permit number 1022 DVP 1022 attached as appendix 1 to the report titled DVP 1022 1249 Howard Drive, parking within front yard setback, dated March 14th, 2023, to vary District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770 1997 for lot 11, district lot 132, Tla-o-qui-aht District Plan, VIP 73017, PID 025 188 372 be issued as follows. 1. Vary part 6.7 of the District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770 1997 to permit parking within the front yard setback as presented on the proposed site plan attached as Exhibit A to DVP 1022.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor McMaster. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you.
A lot of numbers now.
That's why we let you.
Yeah.
Nobody was jumping up.
Yeah. No eye contact.
Okay, 10.3, we have a water master plan contract award. Simon, Mr. Kirkland.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Okay, so today we will be presenting a recommendation to award a contract to a consulting firm to conduct Tofino's water master plan. Financial impacts, so it's a 2022 project that was not completed. $120,000 of this project would be funded from the capital and infrastructure levy. $100,000 of it will be funded from general water charges. Background, so Tofino Water Master Plan project combines 3 previously approved projects. The one project includes watershed source assessment, 20-year capital and operating investment plan, and the development of a water system management program. Second would be to develop a development cost charge technical report as a part of the project. Third being developing an emergency water plan included in this project. And again, all projects were approved in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan. So discussion piece, the Tofino Water Master Plan will guide future investments, maintenance, and priorities related to our water infrastructure. Analysis on source water to investigate limitations during the summer and fall months, the drier seasons with higher usages. We'll identify options for additional water sources through this project, through this process. We complete a review of the current distribution system and storage infrastructure. Through that, develop a strategic asset management plan for our water infrastructure, develop a water conservation plan, align future investments with projected growth, and also coordinate potential Mears Island natural asset initiative as well. So we issued a request for proposal late in 2022. 3 proponents responded to the request: Urban Systems, Stantec, and McElhaney. Staff evaluated the proposals for suitability, experience of the proponents, schedule, and overall quality of the submissions, and determined that McElhaney submitted the superior proposal, which is who we're recommending the contract be awarded to. Community employment benefits. So community engagement is going to be a key aspect to this project. Consultation with the Tla-o-qui-aht Nation will also be key to the success of this project. And then engaging with a wide range of stakeholders, including developers, businesses, and residents, will also be key to success. So the recommendation is that the Tofino Water Master Plan contract be awarded to McElhaney based on their proposal, budgeted at $199,683. And that the project be funded by the capital and infrastructure levy in the amount of $120,000 and water charges in the amount of $100,000. If there's any questions or comments.
Super, thank you. I'll open it up for questions for clarity for, yes, go ahead.
With the proposed timeline, they had an assumed award date of January 20th, and then kind of a completion of the project for October. Can we assume that they would have this done by the end of the year if we were to award them the contract now?
Yeah, through the chair, the goal would likely stagger a little bit, but still aim to wrap up the project by the end of 2023. Would also assist kind of in the staggering with kind of getting some more analysis done during the dry season, because it will extend. And as we did see last year, the drought season did extend kind of into November as well.
Further questions from council? Yes, Councilor McMaster.
Just a question for staff, please. How much do we have in our infrastructure levy at the moment?
Through the chair, could we table the question and come back?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just have to check it.
And related to that is when you say 100,000 from water charges, are you talking about existing water charges, or are you saying our charges that are going to go up to cover that 100,000?
Through the chair, I think I'd have to kind of defer that question to different department. But I believe just through general taxation, but
You can ask another question.
You can.
Off the financial stuff, haven't we done a lot of this work already? I mean, I know there's more to be done, but haven't we got a lot of quarter reports from cores and things that have done a lot of this stuff? I don't want to see them reinventing the wheel, that's all. If it's not needs to be done.
yeah, this through the chair, that's a fair question. I mean, a lot of the reports are quite outdated that have been done in the past, from my review anyways, and I mean, climate change and also kind of changing growth and how the town's developed as well. There has been some kind of source monitoring, but at this time, staff believe that it would be beneficial to go through this, referring back to the previous director of infrastructure's report as well, where that identified specific projects that we would want to undertake under this, call it new revamped Tofino Water Master Plan, and just provide, more direct structure, specifically looking at what capital projects we would want to consider investing in the future to create a more sustainable water supply system as well. Not to go too far into the details, but also certain things like our infrastructure is aging and or at the end of its service life. Our reservoirs, seismic codes, building codes have changed significantly as well. So there's a need for significant condition assessments to be done on all these facilities and kind of so on and so forth. That helps answer the question respectfully.
Okay. Do we have answers from that for, yes, please go ahead.
Through the chair, to Councilor McMaster, I do have answers. I do have answers. Based on the last CNI levy, the last CNI levy reserve balances that I have, so that would be for 2023. The balance in the water fund was $2.535874, so $2.5 million in the water CNI levy as of the end of projected for the end of 2022, but no, projected for the end of 2023. End of 2022.
Okay, so why don't we pay for it all out of the CNI levy?
I think that, as far as I understand, is a decision made, through the finance department in a conversation with ourselves, and we understand that it's meant to be charged. I don't know what the long-term like how far out we've looked into it, so I can't answer that now, but I can get back to you with that information. The second question, the water charges is from 2023 water charges, it would be this year's water charges. The original plan, it was to be funded, it was meant to be done in 2022, and it was funded from water surplus in 2021. We can't roll that surplus over 2 years in a row. We can only roll that surplus over 1 year. So this year we have to spend it on the water charges, and I'd probably have to defer to either Ms. Morehouse or probably Ms. Atiana about why water charges versus C&I levy.
My point being is that, I think we all know when the levy was brought in, it was a pretty contentious issue. And I think a lot of people question, why. And I'm not disagreeing with it, but I think it would appease the public a little bit if we've got this large amount of money that it was actually used to pay for the study. Okay.
I think actually just to your last point there, we're going to see the water and sewer utility bylaw amendment for an increase of 4%. We'll see that in a sec, but it doesn't include an increase for any specific project. So that comes out of the water reserve, which all our water utility rates go into as well. So, okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You're good? Okay. Any further comments or questions from council?
I just have a comment if you're.
Sure. Okay, now is a good time for comments.
Yeah, not specific. I'm really excited about this and looking forward to it. And in the objectives and through the proposal, this is something we've been waiting for a long time. And looking at the objectives and the deliverables that are going to be created through this, I think is going to go a long way to all of the factors that were outlined in there. So I'm very excited about this coming forward. This has been a long time coming, and it's adding on the work that has already been done and has been talked about with this previous council and certainly with this new council as well. So I'm very, very excited about this.
Appreciate the comment.
This is going to be a key plan for going forward in many different ways. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Ms. Morehouse has further information to help.
Perfect. All right.
Let's get it done this meeting.
Get it done this meeting. We're going to vote on this anyway, so we're getting excited.
Thank you through the mayor. It won't answer all of the questions that you have, but generally speaking, the C&I levy does have restrictions on what type of things we can use to pay for it, and included in the water master plan are a couple of different projects, including a DCC technical report and
Emergency water.
the emergency water plan. And so when we combined all of those projects together, some of the elements of those projects weren't eligible to be funded by the C&I levy. So we had to find alternate funding sources for those portions of the project.
Thank you. That was an excellent response. You guys were excellent. Love to see it. Okay. Any further questions, comments from council before we go on? Councillor Steer, would you like to read this?
I certainly would. That the Tofino Water Master Plan contract be awarded to McElhaney Limited based on their proposal price of $199,683 plus GST. And that the project be funded by the capital infrastructure levy water in the amount of $120,000 and water charges in the amount of $100,000.
Second by Councillor Anderson. And I just have a comment. I actually just like to thank Councillor McMaster for asking those questions and staff for responding. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. And I just really appreciate it. And we all benefit from that. So process-wise, thank you. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a water and sewer utility bylaw amendment. Morehouse.
Okay, so I don't have a PowerPoint. This is just going to be a brief discussion, and I can answer any questions related to the proposed amendments that were presented in the appendix of the report submitted. So an amendment bylaw was adopted in 2021 to increase both water and sewer utility rates. And this was actually the first increase to the utility rates since the bylaw was adopted in 2015. So there was a significant increase at that time of 13%. And then also included was a 4% increase as of January 1st, 2020. And that was an inflationary increase. And staff had intended to do a more wholesome review of all of the utility rates, classes, determining rates with the proposed wastewater treatment plant operating costs. That was meant to take place in 2022, but due to limited resources, that full review didn't take place. It's now scheduled to start in the later part of 2023 and then into 2024. So as a result, the current bylaw doesn't include any inflationary increases after 2022, so for future years. And that's what the amendments today are to include. At the February 23rd special budget meeting, staff identified that rising costs of materials and services were one of the main cost drivers that we're seeing in the rise in district operating budgets. So this 4% increase or proposed increase is intended to help mitigate those rising costs.
Super.
Any questions?
Let's open it up for questions from Ms. Morehouse from council before we can make comments, if council chooses to make comments. Any questions? No. Any comments? Yes, Councillor Steer.
I do. And I want to point out that as you in the report verbally and in the report that there was an increase of 13% in 2021 and a further inflationary increase January of 2022. I have some concerns about I mean, in general, I very much support paying for the services and understand the inflationary costs. I also have concerns around applying a 4% over a prescribed period of time. These are large increases to the taxpayer and to the user of this service. And I'm just cognizant of that fact as well. I'm also uncomfortable with locking into an inflationary increase of 4%. I do recognize, and it was reported in the budget process, that supplies, services, we all know are going up, but we certainly projecting out into the future at 4% rate, let's be honest, is somewhat guesswork at this point in time. So I am very uncomfortable with moving forward at multi-year inflationary rate. And I looked through the report and I suspect that would be for this financial plan that we'd be looking at that annual increase of 4% to the 2027 stretching out to. So I would look to council. I'm not sure I have a solution for that other than the fact that I would be very uncomfortable moving forward with that 4% increase over those would be the next 4 years in general. I did want to comment, that you had mentioned, and it's in the report, that there will be a rate review later in 2023, which will include a review of the current rate structure and classes, consumption levels and revenue requirements, and the development of the sewer utility charges somewhat separate, but understood. Where I might have some comfort is after that review was completed, and I would also suggest that maybe if there was also within that review process is that we can look for further efficiencies in the operating can be achieved, that we may at that point have a better understanding of what those pressures might be, and if that reduction of those annual increases could be seen before committing to this process at this point. I would leave it out to the rest of council to maybe comment, because I wouldn't be able to support the recommendation as it is now.
Good. Taking that as maybe a question. What for you, Ms. Morehouse?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I think that is a good point. We are going to be going through that review process, and even just the water master planning process that's going to happen shortly is going to give us a lot of information to help us with that rate review. The current increase that's proposed would come into effect as of April 1st of this year. So it's to help the projected increase of costs specifically in 2023 and then future increases as we move forward. So I can't say for sure, obviously, without information of what that review is going to look like, but yes, it is probably safe to assume that once that review happens, there will be changes to the bylaw one way or another.
If I may follow up.
Yeah,
So at that point in time, then if there was some amendments that needed to be made, we would bring that. So if we would move forward with this amendment, there would, after the completion of a review and there were some efficiencies found and some reductions, we would revisit at that point. Is that what I'd be like to understand?
Thank you. Yes, that's my understanding, is that after the rate review process, there may or may not be changes to the rate classes or the way that the rates are structured right now. So we would likely see additional amendments to the bylaw at that time to address any kind of information.
If I may, through the chair, we would present council with a full report as to what we found in the rate review and any related amendments to the current bylaws as a result of this review. So we would definitely present any findings to council.
I have a follow-up question to that one, noting Councillor Steers' comments about the 4% annually thereafter for 2020. That's in perpetuity according to this.
It is, yes.
It is, so that goes on. Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you very much. So I think I'm going to take you off the hot seat and I'm going to look to council because I think this bears debating a wee bit. So you're off the hot seat, and I'd like to say I think Councillor Steer has actually an excellent point. This is technically 4% in perpetuity. You know, even within the current financial budget process, it would be a 20-25%, somewhere in there with inflation or with compounding. 4% compounding inflation is a 20+% increase, and that's something that bears thinking about. So I think that noting Councillor Steer's comments, you know, it might be appropriate that we do need to, of course, respond to present inflationary increases of 4%, which we know are going to go into 2024. So, you know, it's a possibility that we could, amongst council, discuss saying, yes, we'll do 4% for inflation for 2023, 2024 to be reviewed post water assessor, whatever it is we're doing here, the water use assessment. I don't know, it's an idea. I'm throwing it out there. Council, comments? Councillor McMaster.
I mean, I realize got to recoup some money. I wish we were doing the water rate review right now. It would be easy to get it over and do them in one go. Can we modify the amendment so it's not in perpetuity, but until such time as the water rate review?
Sorry, say that again.
Well,
Modify.
we're opposing this 4%. And that's going to be in perpetuity. Correct.
That is the way it is right now. Yeah.
I'm saying, and then we're going to do a water rate review as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Based on our water modeling and water use modeling, yeah.
So can we say we do an increase until such time as the water rate review indicate a change or increase, decrease, or whatever?
Well, the other option we can do is we can refer this back to staff, noting council's comments and reluctance to support it in perpetuity. That's also an option. That's probably the better option. So just noting that, what I would like to do is hear from council so that staff is very aware of council's position. And then at that moment, what we'll do is we'll probably, in my thinking, review it back to staff. April 1st is, I think we have one more meeting before that happens. So we do have a chance to, I believe, first, second, third time. Is it fourth reading?
And I don't go to the director of finance, but I don't believe we did any major rush on this that we could move this to the next meeting. Staff go back, take a look at this, and then I don't think it matters if it gets adopted in May. It's not related. I mean,
Just sorry, through the chair, yes, the Q2 utility billing.
okay, so it'd probably be another meeting and a special meeting,
Yes.
a special meeting to complete it.
I think that's reasonable. Okay.
Good question.
Councillor Anderson?
I'm just wondering if we can give it the 3 readings and it can be amended before a 4th reading.
I mean,
We
something
could
to also be
still
considered.
ahead with this recommendation. And then maybe you might need an additional motion from council for the amendment, to ask for the amendment before 4th reading now. That's another approach.
That's something maybe for corporate services to answer with the process. Go ahead.
Chair, could I suggest potentially approving the April 1st, 2023 increase and dropping the January 1st annually thereafter for this resolution? And therefore do the rate review later this year, early into 24, and then come back? Would that be reasonable?
It's a reasonable idea. The only problem is we have the recommendation in front of us is specifically for the amendment bylaw, and it's spelled out. So we'd have to do. Yeah.
Would it be possible to ask for a 5-minute recess just for us to confer?
It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I just want to do, because we've only actually heard from 3 councillors. So before we do anything, I just want to make sure that the quorum of council doesn't want to forge ahead and say, let's go ahead. So I'm just going to ask council, is everybody, councillor, how do you feel about direction to refer this back to staff or defer this in light of Councillor Steer? Everybody agreeing that we need some delay in adopting this? Okay, so let's do a 5-minute recess and we'll come back with options.
Thank you.
Pretty clear, they're comfortable with 1 year, possibly 2, but not perpetuity. So what has staff got for us?
Through the chair, staff are suggesting that we table the report today, and that staff come back with an updated report based on what we've heard today at council. That would mean scheduling a meeting next week for council to receive that report, so that we could bring it back on the 28th for final reading in advance of April 1st, which is the start of Q2. And so we need this, if we don't get it done before April 1st, then this change wouldn't happen until July. And those increases are important for us this year for that inflationary stuff to deal with what we're currently facing in terms of cost escalation in 2023.
Okay, so that's preferable as opposed to just us going for this and saying as amended to remove and on January 1st annually thereafter. Is that because we could do that? I realize we can actually make a motion to do that.
If I may, through the chair. Yeah, I think that a motion on the fly to amend the bylaws, if it's very specific and very clear, then it's something that could be done. I think that it would have to be just extremely clear to staff in the preparation of the bylaw amendment moving forward, so that they could bring exactly what is required at the next meeting for adoption.
Okay.
There are some restrictions around amendments made between 3rd reading and adoption. So no amendments can happen between those readings. So essentially, if the bylaw amendments that staff made per your motion aren't exactly as you wish them to be, then we'd have to rescind 3rd reading and basically have another meeting at that point. But it may be simpler to schedule a special meeting and table it, unless council's comfortable with a motion today.
No, I think let's do it. Let's go for your initial one. We'll okay. So what we can do is we can make a motion to refer it back to staff to prepare a new report the next regular council meeting for council consideration. Is that good?
Move to table it first.
tabling, we are allowed to move it, we can table it to a specific date. Or we can refer it back to staff, because we're actually referring it back to staff for a slight rewrite. So I think that's the appropriate thing. Is that not the language of tabling and referring? This is a bit of a process question, but
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Law. I think that makes sense to refer it to staff to bring back if there isn't a specific date that we have in mind, a date and time to have another meeting. It's perfectly fine to just refer it to staff, and then we'll propose a special council meeting date between now and the next regular council meeting.
of course, okay, that's what I meant. Yeah, perfect. All right. Have you got enough for that for a motion? Okay. You happy, Councilor McMaster?
No.
Okay, would like to second that.
I'll second it.
Councilor McMaster, any further comments on this? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, nothing under bylaws, business initiated by council members. We have ACRD, Tourism Tofino, and Tofino Housing Corporation.
Thank you.
Steer, you're up.
Through the chair. Yeah, just we had the West Coast Committee meeting. It was the first one of the, and I was elected chair of the West Coast Committee for the ACRD. And at that first meeting, there was the draft financial plan for the West Coast Services, which we recommended to the board to approve, and those are the service areas that that are responsible for here on the West Coast, and that includes the Long Beach Airport, transit, the multiplex, waste management services, and a proposed West Coast emergency coordination. Just a quick note for the transit, multiplex, and proposed West Coast, there was a zero requisition for those particular services because there will be no, well, potentially no activity on those for this year. So that was the big ticket item there. And there was interesting two preliminary lease applications out at airport lands. One was for a very interesting proposal, but that was deferred. We've been working, the ACRD has been working on at the direction of the West Coast Committee to establish the Long Beach Airport land use and development plan. And we're waiting for the completion of that before making some of these. This was a 75-year lease application. And so that was deferred. And there was a shorter term lease, which is non-renewable. It was for another interesting proposal, a short-term mobile music studio out there, which everyone was very supportive of. It sounded quite fun. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Tofino Housing Corporation. I think most of you know anyway, but Ian Scott, the director, is moving on. He, as of April 15th, I believe. I think he stayed a year longer than he expected. It's no surprise. I think we were lucky to have him for that extra year. And I think the Housing Corporation will miss him. We're on the hunt for a replacement. I believe we have 2 applications in with the hope of another third, and hopefully we get someone with the requisite amount of experience. Headwaters is, we're looking at moving around December, January, if things carry on as they are.
Thank you. Tourism Tofino.
Well, we met and we discussed Tourism Tofino. They have a couple, 3, I believe it was 3 board members up for a re-election, or not up for re-election, sorry, their positions are up for election. And there's some discussion about whether to keep the district representative, the parks representative, and they're gonna have a new from the TFN, possibly delegated to have a seat. And so they're deciding whether or not we should maybe be voting members or not, because that would be such a large percentage. 3 seats would be a large percentage of the board if we were all still voting, and maybe that wouldn't be beneficial. So they're going to have a look at that. They're looking at revamping their, possibly their capital repairs and maintenance fund. Because they would like to repave the parking lot, and that's gonna take up most of their funds, and they think that they could maybe better use their MRDT funds if they break that apart into two different funds. Because they can't pave it, from what I understand, is they can't pave it using MRDT funds under that category. The other thing that was, the scholarship fund is going forward. We're gonna have, it's been determined that 2 students at USS will receive $10,000 hopefully. If they meet the criteria, that what the criteria is gonna be that, hopefully that they have prior work experience in tourism, and they will hopefully pursue an education in tourism. But if they don't, then it's gonna come back to the board and we'll decide who's gonna get the funds, and it's really gonna be, the priority is to get that funding out there. Yeah. Oh, well, the January occupancy report shows that for November, that it's below 2020 numbers, but higher than 2019. Yeah. I hope I got that right. But the daily rate is much lower than 2022. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah. More people in 2019, less than
But they're paying us.
than 2022, which was extremely high.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, we have a question from Kelly.
Yeah, just a quick question to Councillor Sloman. Was that 2 $10,000 scholarships?
2 $10,000 scholarships.
Wow.
And they're hoping to expand it to more, and they're hoping to eventually expand it outside of just USS so that it could hit the homeschooling and maybe the housing school as well. But they just wanted to get this rolled out for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just another question for me. The board is looking at removing the voting credentials.
Yeah, it was just kind of decided that, you know, they would like to have a member be from the Tofino, from the TFN, from the parks, and from the district. And so that would be 3 seats of 7. So that would possibly be a large percentage of if we're not voted in members.
Appointed members.
But they're gonna talk to Dave, because Dave Towell, I believe is his name, from the parks. Because in UQLA, for the tourism UQLA, his position is appointed, and they're gonna ask him what he prefers and what works better for him. Appointed but non-voting.
Oh, I see. Appointed. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, yes, because we are elected members, slightly different than a parks employee. But anyway, okay, that's great. Thank you very much for all that. Anything else from council? Seeing none, no unfinished business. Do we have question period? Do we have anybody signed up for question period?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We don't have anybody currently signed up, but we do have a couple members of the public in attendance. So I'll call now if anyone in attendance would like to speak for up to 2 minutes and ask a question about anything on the agenda. Just enter your name, residential address, and which agenda item you'd like to speak to. So calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and there are no submissions.
Super, thank you. We have no closed session, and therefore we're not reconvening from closed session, and nothing else but adjournment. So I'll move adjournment. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments on this?
No one voted.
All in favor? Okay, none opposed, motion is carried. Thank you.